Well, kia ora, good afternoon everyone. Building and construction delivers 7% of our GDP and its significance cannot be underestimated. Today, Building and Construction Minister Chris Penk is with me. He's driven an aggressive and large body of work to liberate the building sector of unnecessary regulation and bureaucracy. In just over 18 months, this government has removed barriers to high-quality overseas building products, to lift competition and to lower prices. We've made it easier to build garages, sheds and sleepouts, and exempted granny flats up to 70 square metres from consenting rules.
indemnity insurance is actually really common across design professionals such as architects and also engineers. So that would need to change, and Cabinet will consider whether that kind of scheme should be mandatory, for example.
What assurances have you had, though, from the insurance sector about whether they're prepared to cover builders for this level of risk?
Yeah, look, I've engaged closely with the insurance sector, and there is some appetite, but it's a chicken and egg situation. We need to give everyone the comfort and the certainty that we are moving to the system to see what the willingness of them to step up is. I would point out, in addition to professional indemnity insurance, that group home builders often have their own bespoke schemes to provide insurance or comfort. Likewise, master builders have a 10-year guarantee, and Halo is a certified builders product likewise. Around half the builds are currently already covered in such a way. And then if you think about the private market already provides through Stamford Insurance backed by Lloyd's, there are options available, and we're considering what more we could require or enable in that space.
These liability changes, they won't go forward until you've made the decisions around the warranties and the insurance?
Well, that's right. So that's the work that we're doing now. But we want to move at pace. Obviously the details are important, but if we are able to have legislation introduced with this framework liability big change signal today into law by the middle of next year, then we've got the intervening period of time to make sure those protections are in place.
One of the changes that you've talked about and that you're making here highlights the fact that among the 66 odd BCAs, there's a lot of inconsistency, like I say, from one authority to another. But the changes that you've announced today, which may mean some amalgamation, what will that actually do per se to stop that that variety of different treatment?
Yeah, well, it means we won't have 66 different interpretations of the single building code. And a smaller number that will be helpful, particularly at a regional level where people often build within a region and are not confined, of course, in the real world to the council boundaries, city or district council. So we know that enabling them to consolidate those functions will be helpful for those who are building at scale within a region. But also we know that from the council's point of view, it means they can share resources. Things like the accreditation process that happens every couple of years, sharing the human resources, with key staff being able to specialise within a region, and also share IT systems and costs like that to achieve the economy of scale.
Councils aren't going to, and I noticed one of the councils can either get another council to do their work for them, if you like, or now can potentially go to a private provider who might want to provide that. Do you expect that this will see a boon or a growth in, I guess, the private certification industry providing services to council?
Well, we think it'll make the public sector options available at the local government level stronger and more robust and more consistent. Of course, there is a private option available already in the existence of New Zealand's first private building consent authority. But I would distinguish that from the case where at the moment councils actually sometimes pass the work to other councils on a contract basis or to private certifiers. But that then still comes back to the original council and they still remain liable. So that's the situation where we want to enable them the maximum benefit of the flexibility, but also to ensure that there is one accountable entity.
Why not require that consolidation? Why keep it voluntary?
Yeah, well, I and the government have been working closely with local government to understand what's going to help them be efficient for their own sake, but of course also for the purposes of the sector. And their feedback clearly, having consulted on a few different options, including non-voluntary consolidation of those functions, was that for those that are already keen to do this and to some extent do share services, that to give them the ability to formalise those would represent the quickest, easiest and most affordable way to get that gain immediately.
So how many do you think we'll end up with?
Well, any number fewer than 66 would be a good start, but I can tell you, for example, within the Waikato region, there are 8 councils that already work together as a building consent group, and they've indicated that they're keen to formalise that. And other examples around the country within regions, I think, indicate that we'll have quite a lot of movement on that at the minute that we allow it through the Building Act.
That you'd be happy with?
No, again, any number smaller than 66 would be a win, but I suspect that at regional level we'll see perhaps as many as half a dozen moves made quite promptly based on the feedback that we've been getting throughout the discussion.
And the only other thing I'd add, Craig, is that what's been interesting is that we're now getting district councils working together collaboratively on, say, regional city deal proposals. They're also working together on how they might reorganise their Three Waters assets, and obviously the ability for them now to either outsource or do arrangements with other neighbouring district councils on BCAs and how they might manage that. I think there's actually been some really good grassroots progress of collaboration happening at the district council level, which is not unhelpful.
So just to be clear, on indemnity insurance issue. If that isn't a requirement, is it correct that the property owner could be left exposed because if the builder goes bust, then tough luck?
Yeah, I mean, we're really clear that, and Cabinet's agreed to progress consumer protection measures precisely because we don't want the problem of the empty chair where there is a gap in terms of, you know, what the homeowner might be left with. But we also know that if we have a proportionate liability system where all the key players in the system either required to have the protections in place themselves and are also motivated not to make the errors in the first place, then we'll have a more productive and efficient and better system overall.
What is your thinking? Like, why are you not coming out and saying that indemnity insurance is a must? Why is that not being decided?
Yeah, well, the detail's important. We need to take time to bring the sector along with us for that, and you know the nuance for professional indemnity insurance versus those other mechanisms could be quite meaningful in terms of the design of the system. We don't want to add costs simply by shifting the liability and therefore the costs from the ratepayer and the council to a private avenue instead. So we need to carefully balance those considerations as we finalise that detail.
Can you give people a guarantee though today that when the change is made, whichever mechanism you choose, the homeowner is not, the property owner is not going to be left with the problem, chasing the builder who then can't pay them, for example?
Yeah, and that's very much the point of having the consumer protections in place. And I would just add this intersects with work being done elsewhere in government to avoid the problem of phoenixing, whereas obviously a building company or a trade company might try and walk away from their obligations currently, and under a limited liability company there's nothing to stop them doing that. So that will broaden the ability of government to make sure that the responsibility, the liability actually remains with those responsible for doing the work.
Could the cost of building go up?
The cost of building will reduce as a result because the delays that are currently associated with the model now, where councils are understandably risk averse and take a long time to issue building consents, conduct multiple inspections and then issue a co-compliance certificate. Once you reduce that delay, then you get better productivity and costs will reduce. If you think about as well the fact that a lot of the costs of the insurance and the schemes that are already taken up in a lot of cases, that's already baked in, and the experience that we foresee, as we've seen in Australia, is that you can get those efficiencies and actually have a better, more productive system.
You've spoken about reducing delays. There's some building consent data out last week which found, I think, the vast majority of authorities were meeting their statutory timelines with regards to doing consenting. So are there delays or are those timelines just too long?
Well, I mean, you can make an argument that the statutory timeframe of 20 working days could be reduced, and in fact, in some cases, for example, incentivising the uptake of solar residential, we have reduced those timeframes, and we've also put an inspection timeframe target of 80% of inspections within 3 working days. But in terms of consents being issued, the key question is really from the point of view who are those relying on the work being efficiently done, goes to the question of, first of all, we're in a relative lull at the moment in terms of building activity, and there's lots of green shoots and there's lots of things we can say about the system going to ramp up nicely. But at the moment where there are significant delays and we've got, let's say 34,000 consents annually as compared with more like 50,000, this is the right time to reform the system. And secondly, in terms of the consents, we want them to be done as quickly as reasonably possible. And we also don't want the scenario that's sometimes raised with me whereby the council doesn't actually start the clock on the statutory timeframe until such time as they've processed it, as opposed to when they receive it, or stop the clock through requests for further information or RFIs, which is a common bugbear.
What concrete action is the government taking against cowboy builders and developers? Would you consider bringing in criminal penalties?
Well, we've already indicated and Cabinet's agreed that the penalties are increasing, but also within the system design we're connecting up the ability of the practitioner boards, which are the licensing authority but also the disciplinary function, to hold those to account. In some cases there isn't a code of ethics against which they can hold practitioners accountable. There aren't always reports for poor quality or unethical building work that gets reported to them by the councils doing the work. And then finally, in terms of making sure that we have the occupational licensing, the importance is that we've got a system where if we trust people who are worthy of that trust and that respect, the experience, the qualification, the track record, then we can actually rely on that meaningfully, and actually that will help shift the incentives in the system for people to do good quality work and carry it out much more quickly and therefore affordably.
Minister, you've got 5 unions coming out.
Let's go to...
Just on those 5 unions that have filed legal action against the government over pay equity, Prime Minister, it's an issue that keeps re-emerging. What are you going to do about it? And are you sure it was the right move?
Yes, I mean the former regime, as I've said before, is unworkable and it become too large, too broad and too loose. We made the changes, as you know, back in May, and we stand by those decisions. I'll be a little bit careful in terms of how much I pass comment about it, given there's pending litigation around those issues. But again, from our point of view, Labor changed legislation to make it much broader, much looser, and frankly more unworkable when you've got librarians being compared to sort of fisheries officers, when you've got social workers being compared to detectives. We needed to fix the system, and that's what we've done. Pay equity still remains. It still remains. We still encourage people to exercise claims. We've put money aside to actually to meet those claims, and we think that's fair and gives people certainty.
So you were invited to the Coalition of the Willing virtual meeting but did not attend due to time zone differences. How is that acceptable considering Anthony Albanese attended?
Because we're in a different time zone, and it was about 1 a.m. in the morning this morning. And I've been to many of the Coalition of the Willing calls. I've actually been asked to speak at them as well in the past as well. We had officials representing me there, and importantly, I've had, even in the last few weeks, I've had direct conversations with President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer as well, and others.
So do you think it's important that you show up to those, especially considering the amount of progress we're seeing on Ukraine?
Yeah, it is, and I normally do, and I have tried to make them wherever possible I can. Obviously, this one was at 1 a.m. in the morning. It goes for 2 to 3 hours, and then I'm on a media round this morning, and obviously down here for Cabinet this morning as well. So I was well represented by officials, but what is encouraging is the progress that we are seeing, the fact that there is conversations happening, led with President Trump, but also the European leaders. But again, our message is pretty clear. Russia could stop this today if it wished by having a ceasefire immediately on land, sea and air.
You deemed it not important enough to be up at 1 a.m. to join?
No. I have joined in the past. I was just saying that basically the decision was made that I was going to be well represented by officials in this particular instance. But I have joined the calls many, many times before, and I'll continue to do so. It was just in the case of this instance.
What did you make of the summit over the weekend?
Sorry?
What did you make of the summit over the weekend?
Look, I mean, we just encourage dialogue and diplomacy where possible, and I think it's encouraging to see the signs that have taken place. Obviously, the efforts with President Trump and President Putin. You've had European leaders, meeting with President Trump last week. Again, looking like they're going to meet up this week. All of that is good stuff. We need to make sure there's a just and lasting peace that breaks out in Ukraine, and for that to happen, we need to be able to make sure all those parties are working incredibly hard to create the conditions for that. Obviously, we want Ukraine to be at the table in any of those conversations, and it needs to be at the table to do so.
Minister, do you personally believe that Ukraine should cede territory as part of a deal to end the war?
That's ultimately a decision for Ukraine to make. What we want to see is we stand with Ukraine because it was an unjust war, and we want to see it ended. But we want to see a lasting and just peace break out in Ukraine. For that to happen, it requires Ukraine to be at the table for those negotiations, but ultimately that's a question for them.
Donald Trump's put out a post today saying that Ukraine won't be getting back Crimea. Is that something that Donald Trump should be saying? Isn't that up for Ukraine to negotiate?
Well, I note that there's meetings, taking place with European leaders and President Zelensky and President Trump this week, this Monday US time. So, that's for them to. That's obviously a decision ultimately for Ukraine, and they need to be in those conversations and party to those conversations. There is no way that a just and lasting peace is going to be achieved without Ukraine at the bargaining table.
Prime Minister, how concerned were you by the Airways outage over the weekend? You're a former airline CEO. How concerning was that? Yeah,
I noted that over the weekend. I actually called and asked for advice on what was happening there. I understand there was a network outage of some sort. I'll make sure that our Minister of Transport and Associate Transport Minister get to the bottom of that.
Do you still have full confidence in the airways system?
Yes, I do. And the fact that there are so many redundancies built into the system in aviation is really important. And it may have meant that people were avoiding oceanic airspace for a period of time. That's a good thing that actually they were avoiding that airspace if there was a network failure, and actually people who are abundance of caution takes place and kicks into the aviation system. That's what you want to see.
Minister, why did you call out David Seymour for writing a letter to the UN when it turns out that he'd already run it past Paul Goldsmith?
Look, I'm not going to get into that. We've canvassed that before. Again, we've got a Minister of Foreign Affairs who coordinates our responses with the UN.
Were you aware of Paul Portsmouth's involvement and awareness?
Again, I'm not going to go into that. We've got a very clear position, which is that Winston Peters is our foreign minister. He engages with the United Nations.
This is a new development, Prime Minister. What do you make of this? Is a new development to that story. What do you make of that?
Well, again, the situation is that Winston Peters is our Minister of Foreign Affairs. He responds to the United Nations. He is the one that is accountable for building and holding that relationship, and he will coordinate a response on behalf of all of the government and of all the ministers, of which questions were raised in that letter, and it will be up to him to present that case.
What does it say about your cabinet that there were multiple ministers within your cabinet who didn't understand that process?
Well, it's pretty clear to them now. I've made it pretty clear.
Prime Minister, what do you make of the soldier who pleaded guilty to allegations of spying?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that, obviously, while that's before the military court at the moment.
Prime Minister,
yes.
Happy Tongan Language Week, first of all, and also just want your comments on Tuvalu's Prime Minister threatening to walk away from the Pacific Islands Forum if dialogue partners are excluded. How concerned are you that this decision could fracture regional unity?
Yeah, look, we are concerned. I mean, we've advocated very strongly for the status quo, that actually the Pacific Island Forum family countries come together, and then the dialogue partners who are from all over the world can be present as well, and we want all dialogue partners to be there. Winston Peters was present in a meeting of foreign ministers last week, as you know, in Fiji, and made that case pretty strongly that we want to uphold the status quo. We think that's important. We can still continue our regional architecture conversations, which we need to close out, but we want to maintain the status quo. Sorry?
Have you been in contact with PIF following the foreign ministers' meeting ahead of the latest meeting?
I've spoken to Winston briefly about it this morning, where he reiterated that we had made the case for maintaining the status quo. Ultimately, that's a decision for the members to make, and that's why I think you're seeing members are saying, look, this is a great opportunity for us to come together as a family of Pacific Island nations, but also it's an opportunity for our dialogue partners to be present, as they always have been.
Do you think outside forces are playing a role in the policy being taken by the Solomons, as I think the Foreign Minister said last week?
Well, again, I mean, all we're advocating for is the status quo. We think the program has worked well, where the Pacific Island Forum countries can come together, have time to themselves, but also have an opportunity for dialogue partners to engage with the forum as well. We've been advocating very strongly around the world that if you want to engage with the Pacific Island Forum and its centrality should be respected, and that's the forum by which all partners should try and engage with the forum directly.
Prime Minister, are you concerned about the immigration situation for Kiwis heading to the United States?
In what regard, sorry?
To visit, we've seen a number of people that have been detained, etc. And the border, there was the musician that was detained and deported. Are you particularly concerned in any way about the approach that's being taken there?
Well, it's a good reminder for Kiwis everywhere to be fully compliant with the rules and regulations around immigration for different countries. I mean, it's important for each and every individual to have their paperwork in check and to be, to make sure they're fully compliant. But again, that's my advice to anyone travelling anywhere outside of New Zealand, is make sure that you're compliant with the laws of the country that you're visiting.
Just on building consents, would you just be able to run through what the process from here on in will be until you get this over the line around the changes you're proposing?
Yeah, so Cabinet now having made the decision, the changes that we're announcing today, the Building Act will need to be amended in both those respects, and we'll tie that in with other amendments to the Building Act for areas that we've already indicated are going to be legislated between now and the election. So early next year will be the introduction of a bill to take account of these changes. If it's passed by the middle of next year, as we expect and hope, then we'll be able to go from there, including any regulatory moves that need to be made for that finer detail from the second half of next year on.
Prime Minister, we've got a stroke coming up on Wednesday. How are you feeling about that?
Oh, look, I mean, our advice to the unions is to get around the bargaining table. That's where negotiations and collective bargaining should be hammered out. We don't think it's fair that kids that have missed a lot of schooling already with COVID, we know we've got work to do on attendance and academic achievement with our kids. It's important that they're in school. Likewise, the same way we felt about nurses striking as well, is that there's lots of patients that are missing out on surgeries as a result of those strike actions, and so we just encourage the unions to get around the table with the employers.
Are secondary school teachers underpaid?
Sorry?
Are secondary school teachers underpaid?
Well, actually, over the last 3 years, there's been about a 14.5% increase for secondary school teachers. I think the average pay now is over just over $100,000. There's been significant increases in pay over the last 3 years in particular. As you know, there's an offer on the table. I don't want to go into those numbers, but in pretty challenging fiscal times, we think that's a pretty fair offer. But again, the issue here is that we're interested in the interests of the kids. They need to be in school, they need to be in class. That's really important, and we just encourage the unions to get around the table and actually continue negotiations with the Ministry of Education.
Can you clarify what Judith Collins was referring to or suggesting the other day in an interview when she said that you're looking at different options in terms of industrial action? What specific options is the government looking at?
I'm not sure, you'd have to talk with her. All I'm saying to you is that with respect to the teachers' negotiation, it's really important that the unions come back to the table. Strike action doesn't serve the interests of our kids, and that's really important that we're doing everything we can to keep them in class and also teaching them everything that they need to know, particularly when we've got some challenges on making sure they understand, the reading and numeracy scores have been poor and attendance has been poor. And so it's really important we keep kids in class, and unions and their negotiations should be done in the right forum, which is actually with the Ministry of Education.
It's also suggested that teachers who have been in place for 10 years earn around $140,000. Are you confident in those numbers?
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown of numbers with me now. All I can say is that I'm aware that the average salary, I think, is just over $100,000. There is obviously a 14.5% increase that's taken place over the last 3 years, from 93 to 100,000, just over 100,000, I think. And there'll be
$140,000 for teachers who have been in their jobs for over 10 years, and a number of teachers have said that's simply not the case.
I'm very happy to get you the full breakdown of the numbers if that's helpful. Yep.
Do you have confidence that your Attorney General is sharing the correct information with the public?
Yes.
Back on the building issue, back in 2019, the then CEO of the Insurance Council talked to me about this, and he basically said that insurers would only be keen for this if they're under a bunch of conditions, like that building work materials could be insurable, building standards were improved and better policed, insurers could chase negligent parties in disputes. Insurers aren't going to just take on the risk unless there are a whole bunch of mitigating issues. So how can you be confident that this approach would not increase the cost of building houses?
I've had the same conversation with the Insurance Council and other key players within the insurance sector, and they made the same comments to me, and I take those on board, and in fact those are all the things that we're looking to do anyway in terms of improving standards, making sure that materials and products are equal to or higher than those already used in New Zealand. So providing assurance in those areas for the protection of the Kiwi consumer is exactly what the government's interested in doing, as well as the insurers from their commercial perspective. So we'll remain engaged with them about their appetite and willingness to provide further products, but certainly in terms of the existing consumer protection guarantees that are available, we'll think about how those could fit in with any additional measures that we might require within the next period of time.
Do you think those existing guarantees are adequate?
Well, no, that's why we're looking at what we should have in place.
10-year guarantee, there's been previous reporting in the past, people say those guarantees aren't worth the paper they're written on.
Well, certainly the detail's important, and I think it's important that we are clear as the government, just as consumers are clear about what exactly the coverage is. For example, whether insurance covers the building professional against a claim that's been made against them, as opposed to being something directly that the consumer could sue or claim upon. So those are the kinds of detailed conversations that we'll continue to have to make sure that there aren't any gaps in the system.
Is it likely to end up that there is some sort of, you get a house built, builder has indemnity insurance, that you can make, that builder could go out of business or whatever, but you can make a claim against that insurance 8 years down the line, for instance?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of scheme that we're interested in, because people do go in and out of business, and we don't want an empty chair problem, essentially, where the vulnerable consumer is left with a gap in terms of their coverage. So those are the kinds of conversations that we're having to make sure that there isn't such a gap.
So if all this goes ahead, productivity improvement, overall cost of building might come down, but the insurance component of that could well rise a little bit, right? Because all of a sudden there are parts of work being insured that weren't necessarily being insured before, right?
Well, that's potentially true, but the reality is that these products are available now, and actually in many cases are relied upon already. So the additional cost that comes with the chilling effect of that joint and several liability that councils faced is adding the time and the delay and therefore the cost in that realm as well. So we're sort of paying twice in the sense that we're trying to protect against the system and therefore being risk averse and slow as councils, at the same time as people are also paying out for their halo guarantee under certified builders or 10-year guarantee under the master builders regime, for example.
Is there a reasonable amount of cross-party support for this? The opposition sort of been supportive? Have you talked to them about it?
Yeah, I'll let them obviously speak for themselves, but having discussed this and other matters with the Labour spokesperson for building construction, I'm really confident that they're on board with the general principle, and of course, the appropriate role for them is to be interested in interrogating the detail, just as we as a government are interested in getting the detail right as well.
Have you drafted the bill yet?
No, PCO will draft that with the Cabinet decision having been made today, so that will take place from now on.
So you'll take into account what the insurers' concerns are before you do that, or are you going to cross that bridge afterwards?
Yeah, no, we need to take into account all the concerns and the interests and the requirements of the system in the drafting of the legislation, although of course it's also possible for detail to be in regulation and for that to take place as a secondary process as well.
Okay, last question, team.
What happens if there's these consumer protection, that sort of stuff worked out? What happens if you don't have it all ready at the same time? There's a sort of phasing in period.
Yeah, we will have it ready at the same time. And the good news is, in terms of looking across the Tasman, the regime that Australia's already got in place, we can frankly copy their homework on it to a large extent. In fact, earlier this year at a liability roundtable symposium, we had an Australian judge who was very generous with their insights about how the system works there, including specific wording of the legislation that they have at a state level that they would potentially change and that we can take account of right now. So it'll be relatively straightforward, I think, if we're clever about the way that we learn from Australia's lessons in a positive way and implement them here.
Do you know what percentage of builders or builds at the moment have a similar product applied to them?
Yeah, it's around half. But there are also different kinds of products, of course. So the group home builders often have at that whole group franchisor level an assurance scheme for those having work done by their local franchise of whichever of those they choose.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good week.